Welcome back. I now welcome on a very special guest here to the Giant Take podcast, writer for the Giants Wire at USA Today and Pro Sports Extra. It's Doug Rush. Doug, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you coming on. And, it's a good time to come on because yesterday we got some breaking news. We had Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen address the media. I don't know if that was a couple of days ago now. The days are kind of flying by in this week. But today... Thursday, yes. What was I going to say? The combine is happening right now as we're talking, so that's super fun. QBs, tight ends, wide receivers. I think by the time we're recording here around 6 o'clock on Thursday, just so far it's been the tight ends going. I think as we go along, though, tonight there'll be more stuff happening. This episode will come out Friday morning, so going to look towards some other guys, right? Is it offensive linemen tomorrow?
I believe so. I think today you had said it. The quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and the tight ends were today, and I think the linemen are tomorrow.
And running backs, I think, as well. And then we got linebackers and stuff happening on Saturday. So looking forward to it. My first question I wanted to ask you is just basically, I like to do this with all of our guests just to see how they got into the industry. So how'd you get into the sports writing?
When I was 12 years old, most were dreaming about being a basketball player and being Michael Jordan. And for some reason, I wanted to write and, talk about sports. And I was a mediocre offensive lineman in high school. And I was a backup DH on my baseball team. So I kind of knew that, the sports, journalism was where I wanted to go. And, I went to school for it. Started out, associates, and then I got my bachelor's, and 18, almost 19 years later, I've watched it. I watched the media world evolve. Newspapers were a thing. Now it's more websites and social media that kind of dominate today. It's almost 20 years, and I've watched it evolve. But if you want to stay in it, me being almost 40 years old, you got to evolve with the times. And thankfully, I know a thing or two about, with the technology and everything. And podcasts like these are now a big thing, too. So if you don't stay up with the times, you're going to get pushed along. And, I'm willing to adapt to keep my skills sharp. So.
Right. And you talk about the new technologies. Me as a teenager, I'm a junior in high school and I'm here and I have a podcast. It's easy to do it. You load it in. I decided with my friend Alex one day, I was like, let's start a podcast. Why not? We talk Giants football and here we are. So it's super cool. It's super fun. And it's, like you said.
And good for you. Yeah. Good for you too. 17, I was in my, a junior in high school, I was in 2001. So, I was a sports editor for my newspaper. Podcasts weren't really a thing. If they were, I probably would have done them. So I was more the sports writer. But, in 2022, if you have the motivation, if you have the technology, and if you have the will to do it, yeah, absolutely. And kudos to you for doing this. And, all I can say is if you really want to do it, stay at it, find your skills, and the sky is the limit for you. There's people out there who started in a little basement or a little studio that probably, I worked for Bleacher Report the first year before they ever got bought by Turner. And I was writing for a couple of hundred people. And then all of a sudden they got bought by Turner. And now all of a sudden my audience grew by millions. So, just stay at it, and the sky's the limit for you. So kudos to you for being a junior in high school. But forget that you're a junior in high school. You are somebody with a podcast. So just keep at it. That's all. That's my best advice for you. If you love it and you want to do it, just keep at it.
Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I do. I love the support. And the writing you do really helps me out getting my stuff to talk about. So I thank you for that. And I want to start out by something you wrote about a few days ago. You talked about Mitchell Trubisky, or you wrote about Mitchell Trubisky. Now let's talk about it. Can he come in here as a backup with the New York Giants behind Daniel Jones? We've heard Daboll talk about it. We heard Schoen talk about it. That's their QB for at least 2022. We don't know about the fifth-year option yet. Schoen doesn't want to, talk about that. But talk about a little bit, can Mitch Trubisky come in here as a backup and maybe step in if Jones gets injured or what have you?
That's if he So there's been talk that Mitchell Trubisky could potentially be a starting quarterback. There have been teams rumbling that they might look to Trubisky because Matt Nagy and Trubisky didn't mesh well in Chicago. He spent last year in Buffalo, and everyone, has seen, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll taking a lot of some of the Buffalo things out of there and bringing them to the Giants. And a lot of people thought, well, they could also bring Trubisky in too, which could make sense, especially Daniel Jones hasn't been able to stay healthy once during his career. But the problem is, if Trubisky gets starter money and gets a chance to start somewhere else in the NFL, I think he's going to take the opportunity, because even if you offer him a chance to compete, and especially compete with Daniel Jones, and it's not a guarantee that Daniel Jones could be the starter, because, if you brought in Trubisky with Jones, and if Trubisky beats him out, because that's competition. But I think if another team like, let's say, the Commanders or the Broncos or the Steelers or somebody else who needs a starting quarterback right now gives him $12 million right now to start for 2022, I think Trubisky would jump at it. But if a team doesn't, if they go the trade route or the draft route or whatever route, and Trubisky's still sitting out there in free agency, and he doesn't get a starting offer from somebody else, and if they give him, I don't know, he took $2.5 million last year from Buffalo. Let's say they offer him $4 million to say, hey, come in and compete. If you're the backup, you're the backup. But let's say if Jones' neck gets hurt again or his hamstring gets hurt, and maybe he starts, then it's not a terrible option, because we all saw what happened when Daniel Jones went down with the neck injury last year. The Giants didn't win a single game after that. And we saw horrible, horrible quarterback play from Mike Glennon and from Jake Fromm. Fromm, you understand, because he was literally a young guy who was trying to figure it out. Mike Glennon at least had some NFL experience, but good Lord, he did not look like he ever saw an NFL field before. It shows you really need a competent backup. God forbid if you have a quarterback who has injuries like Daniel Jones has. And especially with a neck injury, if he takes another shot, especially, he's dealt with bad offensive lines. God forbid he takes another shot to the neck or something else and goes down for a significant period. Now you need somebody else to step in. You at least need someone who can, knows the playbook, take the snaps, knows what they're doing. That's where somebody like Trubisky, who knows Daboll, would make sense. But if he's not available, then you're looking at plan B and C and D and whoever else is available out there.
Yeah, and you mentioned a good point of who are the Giants going to bring in, because it seemed like they undervalued the position of a backup quarterback. They definitely did that. It's funny though, because I can say they undervalued it by signing Mike Glennon. He was one of the first signings of the Giants free agency last season. I know Devontae Booker was the first, where he ended up. Now he got cut. You have Mike Glennon as either the second, third, fourth, whatever it was, but he was one of the first guys the Giants signed last year in free agency, which is just crazy because now he's not on the team anymore.
And it shows that Dave Gettleman he did not spend the money that he had in the right places. And you're seeing some of already being shed. Kyle Rudolph already getting cut, Devontae Booker, Riley Dixon's probably going to be gone soon. They've asked Sterling Shepard to take a pay cut, but that's age and injuries. But I never agreed with the money they gave to Kenny Golladay, because I was more in favor of bringing back Kevin Ziegler. But it just, Dave Gettleman literally dug the Giants into a hole that Joe Schoen and his people are literally trying to get themselves out of, and they're slowly getting themselves out of it. But we don't know if Sterling Shepard will be on the team next year, and whoever else. If you have a slightly high contract that can save the Giants some money, there's a good chance you might not be playing for the Giants next year.
I agree. And I think that leads to bigger questions at particular positions. Two of the guys being part of those that got cut in the last couple days or yesterday. When you have Devontae Booker running back, that's a big question mark. Saquon Barkley, we had Jordan Schultz reporting that, some teams might be interested, might be offering deals for Barkley. Now you don't have Booker, who is your backup. So you're looking at Saquon Barkley, Gary Brightwell, and was it Williams from the Buffalo Bills?
Antonio Williams, yeah.
Right. So we got him from the Bills. He's a practice squad guy. Brightwell, sort of helped on special teams. Never really saw him behind, Daniel Jones or do any run plays last season. So what's going to happen? That's a big deal. Now Evan Ingram's going to be a free agent. Kyle Rudolph, his backup is gone. That leaves you with Caden Smith. Could Caden Smith who knows what's going to happen for those two potential positions for the New York Giants, running back and tight end?
Tight end, I think at least I think they'll address in the draft. Yeah, Evan Engram. He was probably the most frustrating player because he had so much talent. You couldn't cover him as a linebacker because he was too fast for linebackers, and running back or defensive backs couldn't cover him because they were too small. Yet there were so many plays where Evan Engram dropped so many game potentially sealing catches and touchdowns. Yet I remember the first game for Daniel Jones, Evan Engram was a weapon in that game where he's literally exploding all over the field against Tampa Bay. Yet, I think the play that unfortunately will define his Giants career is that drop catch against the Eagles that would have sealed that win in Philadelphia, and instead the Eagles beat the Giants. That was Evan Engram's career in a nutshell for the Giants. He was so good, yet he was so frustrating. And I was surprised he didn't get traded this past year, given the Giants weren't very good. Evan Engram was a decent tight end who could have helped teams, and yet he didn't get traded. And I think that's shame on Dave Gettleman for not at least getting something for him. And I didn't understand it at the time, but we're past that now, and he's a free agent. I've done a few mock drafts. There's been a couple of tight ends that are good out there. I know there's Trey McBride, Jake Ferguson. There's I think Jalen Windermeyer. You can get a decent tight end, second, third, fourth round, depending on where they fall. It just depends on, I think, where the Giants value a tight end. Again, in the mocks that I've seen and I've done myself, usually you're looking at the second, third, and fourth. So I think that's where they might look. So you're looking at like day 2 or possibly day 3, depending on where they like the tight end. And to go back to the running back situation, so right now it's basically Saquon Barkley and Antonio Williams, I think, is the two. I've said I don't think the Giants will trade Barkley, only because I think the Giants, I don't think there's much of a market to trade for Barkley, who's coming off a down year where he had come back from a torn ACL. He had his ankle stepped on in Dallas, and he missed almost a month. And granted, it's oddly enough, him and Booker had the same exact production, and Barkley played 3 less games, which was surprising on Booker, because Booker, for being as healthy as he was and for looking as explosive as he was, yet Booker and Barkley literally had 593 yards and 2 touchdowns apiece. And yet Barkley was hurt 3 and missed 3 games, as opposed to Booker playing 16. So really, it's kind of shame on Booker for not producing more yards, being it that he played more. I think the Giants, I don't think they'll get a trade offer, because I think teams would rather either look to free agency and maybe get somebody cheaper, or just instead of sending a team a 4th round pick, just draft your own and not have to worry about that. At least that's my logic from another team. You don't have to give up any of your draft picks to go get a running back that may or may not be healthy, where you can just go get somebody with fresh legs. I don't know if it's looking at the Giants are stuck with Barkley, but at the same time, we've seen Saquon Barkley when he's healthy. He's a 1,000-yard back who can get 400 to 700 yards receiving. The things that impressed me was the game against the Bears, where, there's nothing to play for. He still got over 100 yards rushing, where he didn't dance around. He just literally pushed his legs forward. And I think that's what kind of Brian Daboll and his offense needs to do. Eliminate the dancing behind the line. Run straight forward. You have these enormous legs. You have enormous strength. Use that to your strength. Use that on the field. Until otherwise, I think Saquon Barkley is going to be the starting running back. Now, and people are saying, well, you should trade him. Once you trade him, well, they might not be able to trade him, because there might not be a market to trade him unless, he's doing well at the trade deadline. And if the Giants are or not doing well, then that's a decision you make come October or November. But even then, people are like, well, he's not going to be back. Well, that's not a guarantee. Well, let's say he has a 1,200-yard season, and let's say, the Giants have $90+ million coming up, in salary cap space next year. They have a decision to make, and if they don't, I think from what I've understood, they get a third-round pick or something like they got with Landon Collins when he walked away. But for right now, until he is not the running back and unless he's traded somewhere else, I mean, it looks like Saquon Barkley will be this team's running back in 2022.
And you mentioned running backs in the draft. Instead of trading Saquon Barkley and giving up a first-round pick, there are very good running backs that are going to fall into the second round. There's guys like Breece Hall, like Isaiah Spiller, like Kenneth Walker from Michigan State. I know he's probably the top guy there. He could be late first round, maybe, but there are definitely guys that are very top tier running backs in this NFL draft that are going to fall into the second round because the teams aren't falling into the trap, not saying the Giants did, but of valuing a running back very high because the Giants did pick him too. We know this. This isn't, So the depth at that position, I think, are known now by NFL teams, and Saquon Barkley is an example of that not always picking a running back first round is the best option. Although, from what we saw Saquon Barkley's rookie and second year, it was worth it, right? Somewhat. So there's that. I want to talk a little bit more about players to potentially trade for the New York Giants. You have Blake Martinez, you have James Bradberry getting signed in the same offseason. Their contracts are structured to where they could be cut and the Giants would save some money this offseason, but I feel like it's more reasonable or it makes more sense for them to be traded this offseason instead of getting cut. That's just my opinion. If the Giants were going to make a move involving those players, I think they would more likely trade them than cut them, but let me know what you think.
Yeah, it could be either or. I mean, they could. I think my gut says they trade Bradberry because he's still got the value. He's still a very good cornerback. I mean, you could release him and get money back, but I mean, we have little over a month before the draft and to get draft capital back and get draft picks. And if you can they're talking about a possible third or fourth rounder for Bradberry. I mean, you could turn around and get another corner in the draft and potentially second, third, fourth round for $6 or $7.5 million less than what you have to pay Bradberry. I don't see Bradberry coming back because of the contract, the players in the draft, and just the fact that they can save money if he's not here. Granted, you're talking about getting rid of one of your best corners who has, for the most part, been a productive player for the Giants, but this is unfortunately the salary cap hell that Dave Gettleman dug for the New York Giants. So as much as you want to keep some of your best players, unfortunately, you have to put 53 guys out on the field and pay them all. And as we saw by week 18, the Giants couldn't even pay 53 players to be on the field because they were in such salary cap restrictions and strains. And that's the thing that they're trying to get themselves out of. And unfortunately, you have to pick some of the players who, as much as you want to keep everybody, you can't. And Bradberry was healthy. Whereas Blake Martinez, you can make a case where he got hurt early. He had to have the surgery. At the same time, he was hanging around the team facilities when the coach and the GM were getting introduced, which tells me that he still wants to be a part of the team. I would go to him and to see if he's willing to either A, restructure his contract, or B, take a pay cut. See how much, even if you have to convert salary into bonus money, whatever you have to finagle to make it work. If you want to be a Giant, okay, this is what you have to do. If not, then, I don't know if Martinez has trade value only because he got hurt last year, and trying to trade a guy off an ACL, it would be very difficult to do. So if they couldn't trade him, the likely, if he didn't take a pay cut to stay, would be he would probably get released. But when, Blake Martinez was on the field, he was clearly the Giants, best defender who was a tackling machine all over the place. And that defense, when he went missing, they suffered badly. I mean, when he was on the field playing, he was by far their best tackler, their best player. He was the leader, and they suffered greatly when he went down with that injury for the rest of the year. So I would ask Bradberry if he's willing to take a pay cut. If not, You know, there are other linebackers out there in the draft. I mean, this is the type of draft where quarterback isn't really the best and the biggest, and this isn't a Joe Burrow and Tua and Herbert year. This is kind of, you can stock up on linemen, both sides. You can stock up on linebackers. You can stock up on corners. So while losing Blake Martinez would hurt, he's also a year older, a year off of an ACL injury. You could also get somebody younger for a lot less and potentially, get the same kind of production.
I want to move now to at least what Giants fans hope will be the new future of the team, and that is the staff that Joe Schoen has brought in. So I want to know your thoughts on like the new GM Joe Schoen, assistant GM, Brandon Brown. We have the new DC, Wink Martindale, new offensive coordinator Mike Kafka. It's all new.
All new,
right? What do you think of these moves?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's a clean slate. Now, let's go back to when they fired Pat Shurmur and when they were looking for coaches. They got burned on Matt Rule. He ended up going to Carolina, and that was their first choice. Then they tried to get Ron Rivera. He basically canceled the interview and went to Washington. They tried to get Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy canceled the second interview to go to the Cowboys. So basically the Giants were kind of 0 for 3, spurned, and left with basically the best of the remainder. And I think Dave Gettleman, being so burned, kind of got impressed with Joe Judge being a Bill Belichick guy and thought, oh, I got the next Bill Belichick. But he really didn't. And granted, year one was better. And then year two, we kind of saw that, Joe Judge under pressure didn't really live up to what a head coach is supposed to be. And really, Joe Judge lost the job in the last 2 weeks with the 11-minute rant and with the quarterback sneak, and that did him in.
Two quarterback sneaks.
Two quarterback sneaks. Oh, my God. That's the definition of the 2021 Giants, the two quarterback sneaks. With that said, clean slate. Gettleman gone. Joe Judge got basically almost the entire coaching staff completely wiped out, needed to be done. You got Joe Schoen, who I loved, who was the odds-on favorite from the beginning, who everybody wanted, and I think that's great because you should get the guy that you want the most and who should be the heavy favorite. That's good. Joe Schoen learned from not only Brandon Beane in Buffalo, but once upon a time ago was one of Bill Parcells' guys.
Right.
Love Bill Parcells, the way he ran everything about football operations, which was great. Joe Schoen learned how to build a winner in Buffalo, was building Buffalo's team up until it was time for him to run his own team here in New Jersey. And I mean, he was picking assistants that were top guys in winning situations. He picked his assistant, Brandon Brown from Philadelphia, who helped build a tremendous offensive line in Philadelphia and who's going to help Joe Schoen build an offensive line with the Giants. Took Mike Kafka from Andy Reid, who people don't realize Andy Reid has a better coaching bracket and people who've succeeded than Bill Belichick has. So getting somebody from Andy Reid like Mike Kafka to run the offense, fantastic. Getting Don Martindale from Baltimore, who aside from this year, who had a 19th ranked defense, and that's because of injuries. But if you look at 2018, 19, and 20, he had no less than a third-ranked defense. That's tremendous. We're getting back to an aggressive, blitzing-heavy defense that, and I think that's the thing and I think part of that is going to be getting pass rushers, getting guys that can get after the quarterback. That's something really the Giants have not had. I mean, we've gone back years, and at least a good 5 years. I mean, we've had 1 year in the last couple of years where we had a pass rusher with 10-plus sacks. Other than that, I mean, that's something the Giants really, if they had that, they could have had a little more success the last couple of years. But the Giants have not been able to get after the quarterback, and that's been a big, big detriment. Getting Don Martindale into this coaching style, this coaching staff, implementing his defensive schemes, which are going to definitely need pass rushers, we're going to be back to being part of that smash mouth Giants football we all love and saw that won championships and got to the playoffs. And I think that's going to be a key thing. Getting after the quarterback, the Giants wrote the blueprint on how to beat Tom Brady in the playoffs. Get after the quarterback, make him feel uncomfortable, and that's, I think, something that getting him and getting this whole entire coaching staff together, I think, is part of putting the Giants back in the right direction.
We're here. It's March. It's scouting time. It's draft time. And my last question for you is, however you want to organize this, groups of players, positions, or the players themselves, who do you think the Giants should go after, or what positions in this NFL draft?
I've prioritized whether it's you want to go offensive line, defensive line. And the Giants have 2 first-round picks at 5 and 7. Now, if they want to trade down and get more picks, I am totally for that. And the one thing that potentially look for, let's say a team like the Broncos or the Commanders or whoever it is falls in love with a quarterback in this draft. I am not opposed to a team calling up the Giants and wanting to offer, let's say they want to swap first rounders and maybe give the Giants another first rounder for next year because they want to move up and get a quarterback. I'm all for that. That's great. Well, the Giants can move down to 7 or 10 or whatever it is. Stockpile picks, maybe get, for instance, maybe move down and get like Tyler Linderbaum, who could be a center or a guard in this league. Getting Charles Cross, a lineman. I know the goal right now for a lot of fans is at 5, maybe getting Kayvon Thibodeau, who could potentially be there and be the top pass rusher in this draft. Some people have talked about getting Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame. I don't know if he'll be there. I've taken Evan Neal so many times, the offensive lineman from Alabama.
Yeah.
However, I think he's going to be number 1 overall in the draft, and I think Aiden Hutchinson is going to be number 2 by the Detroit Lions. So they might not even be there when the Giants are picking at 5. So for me, I mean, the way that I've done my mock drafts and the way that I think the Giants should look at it, offensive line and defensive line, especially pass rush, those should be 1 and 1A. A linebacker, corner, tight end, maybe another wide receiver, depending on what you do with Sterling Shepard and if Kadarius Toney is healthy. Plus, whether or not Kenny Golladay is healthy too, that's another key situation. Those are probably the areas that the Giants need to address the most. I think backup quarterback or what to figure out who's going to be Daniel Jones's, whether he's going to be having a backup or somebody to push him. I think eventually you figure it out, but I mean, the utmost priorities, O-line, pass rush / linebacker, corner, wide receiver, and tight end. I think those are the areas that the Giants have to address the most going into the draft and free agency.
Writer for the Giants Wire and Pro Sports Extra. Everyone listening, watching, go follow Doug on Twitter at the Doug Rush. Thank you so much, man, for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime. Glad to talk to you.